Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to push out a couple shows more than we normally do just because I think the timing's perfect for positive messaging, and today's going to be no exception to that. I've got Casanova Brooks on the phone today. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, my man. I appreciate you having me on.
You picked up the phone. We already started talking, and I knew this was going to be a good show, so I had to cut our conversation and get this thing recorded because people out there right now, people are stressed. They don't know what to do. And then there's a small group of people like yourself that you look at this as an opportunity. And, I want to talk a little bit about that and some of your history and all the trials and tribulations you've gone through. Where should we start today?
Yeah. So, of course, I appreciate you bringing up the fact that I look at this as an opportunity because I think, one of the things that I've always kind of told myself is your future is brighter than ever. When people look at my backstory and seeing that, I am a survivor for stage 4 cancer, I was 2 weeks away from death. Not only that, but grew up single mom that I was always very close to. And 5 years ago, I lost my mom. At the same time, I was transitioning just in my lifetime at that point. And I was in a brand new city in a brand new state where I had no family, no friends, no church group or anything like that to fall back on. And not only did I lose my mom, but then in a matter of weeks, I lost also my job. And then because I didn't have a job, of course, the bank would not give me a loan on the house that my wife and I was currently in the process of closing on. It was our very first home. And so I lost my mom, I lost my job, and I lost my home in a matter of weeks. Wow. And so that was obviously, a very, very trying time for me. I also had a wife, and I had at the time, 3-year-old boy. And so what was even more trying was mentally I was drained, but at the same time, not only was I being supported emotionally by my wife, but now I was being supported financially by her as well. So at that time, it was a lot of things that was going on in my life. And now we look at this, and a lot of people are going through a similar struggle right now where they're wondering, how will they pay their mortgage? How will they pay their how will they keep their kids safe? How will they keep themselves safe? Like, it's just a huge, huge time for not only the U.S. right now, but of course people all across the world. And I think that there's nothing that's of certainty right now. But the only thing that I would say that is of certainty is just having your faith that your future is brighter than ever. And so that's kind of one of the things that I've always played by, I've always lived by. And, that's why I think a lot of my persistence, my perseverance, and, my resilience comes from. It's not only betting on me, but more importantly, betting on my mindset that I will always find some type of light out of a dark situation.
Yeah, and this appears to be a dark situation for a lot of people, but, as I suggested when we opened the show, this is an opportunity for many. I've heard the term reset. This is a good time to reset, evaluate what you're doing, and maybe dig into another business and or opportunity. And I think you feel the same about that.
Yeah, that was something that we were definitely, talking about right before we went on the air. But I think for a lot of people, they've heard about, really the standard always used to be, that you had safe and secure jobs and then you're going after 401k and all these other things. Well, if you look at it now, it's shown that, you can't, there's no security in betting on anything but yourself and your own mindset. And so I think that for a lot of people, they've struggled with how do they have an opportunity or we've looked at it in our best times of our lives are for most people and for the most part, in my opinion, is when our backs are up against the wall. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you can think of, or someone else that's listening to this call right now can think of how they overcame such a traumatic experience, no matter what it was at a time in their life, because their back was against the wall. So essentially what they did was they had to burn the boats, right? And they had to cut the rope or whatever it was. And then they came out fighting. And then now they look back on that and they say, man,
I love that.
Good time for me. And I did overcome and persevere.
Yeah, I love that term, burn the
What's
boats.
that?
I love the term burn the boats because, it just makes such a huge statement. It's like, hey, we are going to start over, burn those boats. Let's figure this out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look at a situation like we're in right now, your back might be up against the wall and you're figuring, how am I going to overcome this? Well, you have to really think about, okay, over the last, couple years, what has really shown to be your gift? To be your skill. And if you don't have a skill, I would encourage you. I think everybody has some type of a gift or, a skill. But if you don't have one that you can think about right now at a time where everybody's searching for how they can get out of a tough situation. So you think about this and you say, okay, well, what is a high income skill that I can develop if I don't already have one that will work for me? So what does that look like? I think for a lot of people, they're going to be trying to figure out, especially small to medium sized businesses, they're going to be trying to figure out more than ever on the marketing side of things, how do they get their word out? How do they stand out? How do they get that revenue coming back in soon once everything opens back up? And I think this is in any country. So I think that if you could find some type of a high income skill like copywriting, like understanding, SEO or anything like that, because we've shown now how vital I think the online world is and how vital marketing will be. Okay, so I think that the online world has been very, very vital in this trying time because it's shown people that, hey, you can have a solution to being able to reconnect with anyone in a short amount of time. So that's what I would say. I mean, you look at solutions like Zoom where they're allowing face-to-face meetings. You look at and virtual assistants that can still help you to get the word out, get your messaging out, having, again, the systems that are in place. So I think that for a lot of people, it's about really understanding that in the world, what we always talk about, especially in business, but a lot of the times when we get into business is because of our own dreams, our own passions, things like that. But if you understand that our goal in business or really just in life is to figure out how can we solve a problem or how can we solve a need for other people, that's how you'll be successful. So I think at this time right now where it's the most challenging for anyone, we have to look at what are the biggest problems. And it doesn't have to be on a massive scale of like healthcare, but what are the immediate needs that our community needs? What are family needs? And if we can figure out how to solve that problem, even look at what is a frustration for you right now in this time. And so if you can figure out how to solve that problem, most likely if it's a big enough problem, it's a frustration for your neighbor or for your colleague or for your boss or whoever else. And then if you can solve that for yourself and then you can duplicate that system in that process, this is how you'll succeed and be able to become more recession proof for any other, tragedy that could happen in the future. Yeah, no,
it's a very good point, especially when you consider what your own frustrations are. Chances are other people are going through that. And if you can fill that need, it's interesting. I live in Montana. My mom lives in Southern California. She's elderly, and we were trying to order her groceries to be shipped to her house. And we were frustrated because we couldn't get any deliveries over there for the next 5 days. So, using your mentality there, your thought process, maybe there's not enough delivery drivers. Maybe there's an opportunity to go become a delivery driver for the next couple of weeks or something. But, solving your own problems could be also finding opportunities to make money and to exist in this new environment.
Absolutely. And when you think about that, yes, you have to figure out a way that you could thrive in a great market. But in times like this, as long as you're solving a problem, because obviously that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is selling their service or their product, especially in a time like this where they feel like they're taking advantage of something. But understanding that, again, if you're solving a problem, people want to pay for the solution, right? And so you don't necessarily have to gouge people on it, but as long as essentially it's almost like you're operating like a nonprofit, right? And that's the way that you have to look at these things. But if your service or your product really solves a solution in the most trying times, you're going. Yeah, it's kind of like I guess the way that I would look at it is look at tax season. A lot of the times you're not talking to your accountant. I mean, you should be talking to your accountant at least quarterly. But a lot of the times we're not talking to our accountants or our CPAs or our tax providers until that time that they do their service. So they really operate, 3 to 4 months out of the year, a lot of them. but yet they're able to make a healthy living off of it because of the fact that they solve a problem in the most trying time. So that's what I would say, just like you said, can there be more delivery drivers? Maybe you're more of an emergency service delivery driver, but I can tell you that, yes, in a pandemic, right, there's a lot of times that these things are still going to go on. They're just going to go on across maybe one state or one city. And that's where you could still provide those same services. It doesn't have to be national scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of opportunity there. I want to step back in your history a little bit, talking about you being a cancer survivor and, all the trials and tribulations you went through at the time. What were some of the steps or the mental processes that you went through to get beyond that? Where did you find your strength from in going through those trials?
Yeah, so for me, I found a lot of my strengths out of the two women who were raising me at the time and who I would continue to say still raised me, and that was my mom and grandma. And so for me, being honest, I was 15 years old. So, of course, I didn't know a lot of what was going on. My focus on that day to day was just to take whatever medicine or vitamins that I was told to take that day, and then just making sure that I could push forward as best as I could. So I often get the question a lot now, like, would I go through the same things over again? Do I believe more natural things? Because I went through the chemotherapy. And so, of course, it did a lot of good in taking out the bad cells, but it also took out a lot of the good cells as well. Right. So that was something that you just kind of have to go with. But at that time, when I was going through it every day, my only thought was to just keep pushing and just keep moving forward, because I saw what my mom and my grandma were doing. Right. And they were working as many jobs as they could, and they were trying to figure out what type of public assistance there was for me. And it was just kind of a never let them see you sweat mentality. Mm-hmm. On top of that, being 15, of course, you're going through a time right now where you're trying to figure out who you are, right? For anybody, whether you're sick or not sick, going through high school, this is really your time. I was very popular. I played multiple sports. So then at that time, it was like I had an identity crisis, because up until that point, I was always seen as strong, resilient. I was looked at least I felt like at that time, I was looked at, I was on top of the world, and I wasn't really noticing that I didn't have a lack of whatever, because my parents were just doing all that they could, and it wasn't like I was living in a super rich neighborhood. So it felt like at least I was on par with everyone else. So for me, I looked at that and I was like, okay, I just got to keep pushing. But every day it was trying on my mental, because of the fact that I couldn't do everything that I used to be able to do. Now I went in a blink of an eye. I went from being, basically captain of everything I was doing to almost being looked at as a victim now. I was tired in classrooms. So I seen that teachers would be like, hey, are you okay? Do you need to go lay down? All these things, friends were like, hey, they were asking those questions. And so for me, it was tough. Like think about it like this. And hurting right now because we can't turn on the TV and watch sports. But in the world of sports, if you are on top of the world and then all of a sudden you tear your ACL, or you come up with a potential life-threatening injury, or even a career-threatening injury, right? Now think of how quickly that will be taken from you, and how you were looked at as, potentially a all-pro whatever. Now all of a sudden you're just a regular Joe. Yeah. And so at 15, it was hard for me to be able to cope with those things. And so my only thought was to just keep my head down and keep showing that, hey, I'm no different than you. Does that make sense? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you come through this. How do you approach life after that? Because you've had a great career, at least what I'm reading here on paper, and you've come out of something very tough at such a young age. Do you dive into college and go, I got this, no problem? Yeah, so after I got done with that, I being honest, true story, right after it was done, on like the day that I was cured and we were going back home, I told my mom and grandma if it ever came back again, I was going out comfort care style, right? Because it was just so draining for me for these last 2 years. And of course now I have an 8-year-old son and I have a 2-year-old daughter and my wife and employees and everything else. So of course I fight it till the end of time now. But at that time I was like it was just so much. And then I wound up graduating high school just because I was young. I graduated high school at 17 and then went straight into college. And keep in mind, my parents never owned house, car, business, nor were they college graduates. So I was doing everything essentially first generation.